Hello everybody, welcome to the show. Today I have Anthony Blake with me again, which is a delight to have you as always, Tony.
Thank you.
Last time we spoke, we were discussing art and Gurdjieff, weren't we? And I'm going to put a link to that show at the end of this show in case anybody's missed it, which hopefully they haven't. Hopefully everybody's watched it already. It's not necessary to watch that first. You can watch them in any order. But today we thought we would discuss J.G. Bennett's ideas on art. And Tony, you worked with J.G. Bennett for many years, so you should have a good founding on what it was he was meaning. What would J.G. Bennett's idea of art be?
Well, it's not only the time I spent with him, but also in my recent investigations of his work, going back to the time during the Second World War when he started this monumental undertaking of, in a sense, putting together all human knowledge in the light of the ideas he got from Gurdjieff, which he called the system, and making this new world vision or synthesis. And that's at the time when he began to write about art. The fascinating, he's always fascinating, but an interesting feature about his concern with art was that he was doing this in parallel with his interest and his origins in physics, you see. And he was often called a Renaissance man because he was all-embracing and so on. And this was taken as something unusual. When I met him and so on, I found myself, it was not at all unusual for me because I just felt one thing, if you had any kind of intelligence, of course you're interested in science, of course you're interested in art, of course you're interested in history, of course you're interested in everything. But I sort of drew a line on things like football. I must admit I was sort of limited in my scope, you know.
I would draw the line there as well.
Well, yes. And there are those limitations in some way, but because he wanted this integral vision, you know, which really was his passion, which he found a resonance with Gurdjieff, because he has it already in him. That is Gurdjieff's wonderful title, All Everything, or Law and Everything. You see, this is a tantalizing thing in itself, the title, All and Everything. And there's subtle difference between these two words, because Gurdjieff was very hot on the meaning of words anyway. So he had that, you had got to be this all-inclusive, but don't mix things up. You know, there's a kind of distinctiveness which is not a separateness. You know, this is kind of thinking which is not all that common. In fact, I just by my random association think of all the hoo-ha going on now about gender and other things, you see, and most people you find if you make a distinction, then for most people it becomes a conflict. Instead of saying, no, this distinction is bringing out, you know, like the French would say in their common phrase, vive la différence, because out of it comes our meaning, this kind of thing. So in Bennett's all-inclusiveness, he wasn't mixing one thing with another, and it's like having a really happy group of creative people. Everybody has their own thing, their own role to bring you. It's no good everybody trying to play the same role, you know, but you find your own role. And actually this thing called team building is a great art, you know, to find this way in which these individual differences can lead to enhancement and not to conflict. So, and these individuals, though they may play their role of a specific character, are not out of touch in their little world with some boss needing to put them together, you know, coordinate, you know, but they can communicate with each other. That's Rigmore, forgive me for going off that, but as I feel in these discussions, we need to get this feeling for background and context, as it's called. And so let's start this with Bennett's primordial vision, which he really articulated for the first time about 1943 or something like that, and which became his, what he called his cosmic triad. He was a very much a three-man. Everything came in threes that you got from Gurdjieff. And he did something very extraordinary. He said there were these three different kinds, three different, I don't know what to call it, dimensions or aspects of reality. And now, what was reality for him was really sort of centered on the experiencing self. So it was not the kind of cold-blooded out there reality at all, you know. It's just because his starting point was not atoms or space-time, but experience. And contrary to what most people do, treat experience as just an accidental property of things like people, you know, he said the experience is the foundation of everything. And so, in a way, atoms are just particular aspects of experience. It's maybe a weird way of talking, but you need to get hold of this, because it would seem that in this cosmic triad, what you're describing is something psychological, but it was more than psychological. It was just like this, the most extraordinary kind of trinity in a way. Not the theological trinity, but certainly a trinity of saying, there are these three distinct ways of, I don't know, experiencing, or not experience, because that has to be taken into account. Yes, that's the best way to say it. And he called them function, being, and will. And function is what things do. Mm-hmm. Well, what's your function? And you know, how does this machine function? How does a person function? Which means, what do they do? How do planets function? Which is something that Newton studied. And he said, this is, you know, you find out how the bits fit together and how one thing leads to another, and that's all the water function. And those things we can know about. And that's the realm of knowledge, and that's the realm proper of science. And that's its job. And it reaches this apogee in wonderful creative moments, such as Einstein's equation of general relativity, which, if you really get into it, is the most extraordinarily beautiful creation. It's absolutely outstanding. But it's all how things work together. One thing leads to another because it's associated with time. And that's an important thing. So it's not a straightforward thing to understand, but if you think this is the, what do you call it, the nuts and bolts of reality, how it goes on. Then he comes to the second one, which is being. And it's in a way like the antithesis. Being is what things are. And there's this, we have this weird verb, which I sometimes wrestle with myself about. You may laugh at me for this, the verb to be. The resonance of Hamlet, to be or not to be, that is the question. And Bennett himself made actually very, very strongly the verb to be into a radical understanding of time and our grasp of reality. But what is this essential being? What something is, yes, it is. And the big thing he introduced to the apprehension of being, which is to be found in Gurdjieff and other people as well, it was relative. There's a relativity of being, and he did use the language, some things are higher than other things. And he tried to explain this. What do you mean by higher? And do they have more brownie points, you know, or something like that, you know? No, it just means something like they're more highly organized. And this, I'm waving my hands about this because it's trying to invoke possible helpful mental images about what does it more highly organized be. And because it's a very serious question, because you can have in your mind then something like an ant colony. Absolutely amazing, God, you think, and this is, because that's maybe what people will think about, something highly organized, because I don't know, the precision in it, the different roles and the communications happening within it, you know, this is certainly, the ant colony has a togetherness and so on, but there's something, I think, maybe deeper than this, and what would, for example, understanding of the biosphere be like, you know. The biosphere, as you know, or may know, in very important in Bennett's work, and he took the idea years ago from this extraordinary Russian Vernadsky, who lived at the same time as Gurdjieff in Russia, and really created or developed the idea of the biosphere, that realm. And it's very hard to understand because it's a being concept in a way, which is not simply all the living creatures, but all the states in the oceans. It's to do with the rocks, the lithosphere, the oceans, the hydrosphere, and the air, the atmosphere, because these are almost, what's called, is it biogenetic? They're generated out of life itself. You know, the rocks have been shaped by life, and the oceans are made by life, and the air is made by life, and so on. So people doesn't matter. It's not the little animals running around or anything like this, is it? But all of that, so it's all the weather and the earth and maybe radiations on the planets and so on, which is why. So this is really a very rich thing. But then we'll come to the topic and of our conversation here and saying, well, what is it you look at a Rembrandt painting, you see, and you think, well, here's something highly organized. And if you're at all sensitive, you're not sensitive, you just look at it and say, well, there's paint on a surface. That's, you know, it's just bits and pieces. But no, it's just this incredible togetherness in it. It's everything in it is together, and nothing is arbitrary, nothing is left out. And which is a
everything
theme.
is needed, isn't it? Everything is used and is useful to something else to make everything else keep going round in, you know, the way of life.
Now you're talking about the reciprocal maintenance, which is certainly a part of this. And you can say about, it was about how this is kept going and brought together. That's completely right. I'm emphasizing just another angle on it, which is to do, which you can break back into our own experience, because it's like a state. And you see the word, which we bandy about a lot, and I often get hysterical about it, consciousness. I'm beginning to hate more and more that people keep yattering on about consciousness as if they knew what they were talking about and had some, but it's just an assumption, I think. But as you know, the word, you know, con is together, and the shus part about it comes from the Latin word scienta, which is knowledge, and it means knowing together. And that's what, and it's precisely, you know, how Gurdjieff at one point described it, talking to Ouspensky, it's like, he said that knowing together all that you know all at once is consciousness, that sort of thing. Because he really understood this language very deeply, and so this all at onceness, you see. And that's another clue, and just giving these clues. Because in this realm of being, when we're talking about things, we're talking about it must be in a functional way. We're bound to think about it in terms of bits and pieces, what they do. This is not bits and pieces of what they do. It's something else. But you can get it, a state, you know. So this feeling we might have, you know, which is, in words can be perhaps expressed. So some things are more together than others, you know, like you say about people, you know, they're very together, you know, they're the kind of thing.
Yes, I know that, but are they really? On the outside, they might be.
There you go. This is a very important observations. And the when you use the word being, I don't know if I can do it, but you want to voice it in the face. You want to do being, being. You must have being, and not being, being. And it Gurdjieff was going on and on about having being and being mentation, for example, and the thinking with being or from being. It makes, because it means being there, presence, kind of solidity of what, awareness or something. So it's very tantalizing. I just want to leave it as that. Now, I'll come back to it in a minute. And then the third one was will, which will was Mr. Bennett's passion, and it became for him at the end of his life like the ultimate. He even, anyway, dropped being and so on, but at the time they were all equal, and you had will. And will is much more elusive still, and he may have been influenced very much by this 19th century philosopher Schopenhauer, who wrote this famous book called The World as Will and Idea. But for Schopenhauer, will was this sort of irrational, mysterious act, something which is always like stirring, moving, initiating, and Schopenhauer regarded it as just, in a way, blind, just free, just stirring things up. But Bennett saw it much more as something divine, and even God itself was the will, and so on. So these are, just to give you a sketch of these, as I'm doing this, just a very radically different ways of looking at things. There's an associate that empowers with function, knowledge, with being, consciousness, he said, with will, understanding.
Because our will can be quite erratic, I find. I might will to do something one day and then the next day not will it, that kind of thing. And I find a lot of people and books that I've read, including Gurdjieff and such like, it's all about not controlling the will, but learning to use it for the better, for yourself.
That's the kind of oxymoron you do about controlling will or using it. But will is the user and the controller. You get this. It's like the phrase relative nearest to home is where you start from. Its will is what starts, what initiates. You see, and so you can get this all arse backwards. You talk about using the will. It really is complete nonsense. That's considering the will as a function. You can use a function, but before you've even taken a step, their will has acted, has made a step. But anyway, that's extremely elusive. We might come back to it later. But I want to make it strongly, we understand that it's quite elusive because it's not like willpower and the rest of it is omnipresent. But there's all these questions: how does it become individuated? And the Gurdjieff, and one of the things that Bennett got from Gurdjieff was this: what kind of action can there be which is beneficial for the unification of will? Because that was the great Gurdjieff statement. Yeah, as you are manifold. Your name is Legion. Every momentary impulse in you is saying I, as an act of will. You see anything? There's no cohesion. As you say, it's decide one thing one day and the next day the opposite. You do the opposite. All this kind of stuff. He said, how is there a possibility of a unity in this. And it's a very, very deep question. So, but I want to, if that's okay, go back to looking at the three in a simple way. Well,
Of course, this is the cosmic triad still, yes.
the cosmic triad, indeed. And one of the versions he made of it, which is another story, as we might say, but I have to mention it here, is about time, because the function is concerned with linear, ordinary time, clock time, if you like, one thing after another. Causality is a part of it in some shape or other, even though causality is not so simple as it seems. And when you come to being, and from a very early age, Bennett was hot on this. He said, it's another kind of time. Now, there are other people than Bennett who've talked about different kinds of time, but not all that many. Most people can talk about different kinds of space. And like in string theory, you have 10 dimensions and all that stuff. But he said only a few people talk about different kinds of time. And it's in a way crazy because he calls this kind of time eternity, which of course in ordinary language means the timeless. But he said, never mind, and as an aside, we say, look at these equations, you have to give it a minus sign, which makes it like this, and like time, not like space, which has a plus sign to it, and blah, blah, blah. So there's something floating around there about physics and mathematics. But time, and because he was quite convinced that, well, the nearest thing to get us into it is potential. What's potential? Because why? Because the potential doesn't change. And I'm going to use a weird, awkward phrase here. Potential doesn't change in time.
Potential doesn't change in time.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, but it means that, of course, like we're now talking, things are going on, and things are wearing out, and energy is being consumed, and different activities are going on, and all the rest. But you can see, is there something that's invariant in all of this? And yes, there is something that's invariant. And he gave it various names like pattern. And pattern is a wonderful idea. It's not just a pattern of knitting, so to speak, but even that evokes something. It's a pattern. Why is a pattern? Because a pattern's got to do how fitting together. You see, that kind of notion. But this does not exalt it. So the timeless. And it related for him, I must add in here, is when he was very young, I mean, really talking about very young, maybe 20 or something, but even before that, he's very unclear in his autobiography, witness about these early years. He was, this is the time of the First World War, he was in the army and got wounded, which led him to have certain experiences to do with going beyond space and time. He had that behind him. But what he had was the sense of another dimension. And it was not just an abstraction for him, because I mentioned the war, because he came, for whatever stimulus, he came to perceive something about, the terrible thing about the war, just like millions of young men were killed. And
yes, from all countries. Yes, it's terrible.
And he said, well, these lives were not fulfilled. They were cut short. They were often very young men, even 17, 18 years old, sent to the front, slaughtered. But he said, these lives they might have led are still there. They didn't die. The death they had was only in the functional world. All these, what we can call the potential of these young men, remained. And that it's quite a striking thing, you know, for him to assert. Most people say this is absolute, well, this is just a concept we have in our heads, in our memories. We remember James, and yeah, he was just the last letter he wrote home and all that kind of thing, and our sorrow that he's no longer, say, no longer with us. It's true, it's no longer with us, but he is still there. Where there means in this reality, which Bennett was at pains to articulate, to bring into our understanding. You know, that the
So some people might wonder, does he mean that he's carried on living in another dimension as he is? But that's not what you're getting at.
no, well, that's a fair dinkum's on it, absolutely, because it's a matter of perception. I'm going to say, if I'm person, you know, average person, and I'm stuck reading the word of function all the time. You know, I'm just thinking of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and yesterday is gone, tomorrow hasn't come, and I'm in this bizarre pseudo present moment, you know, called nowishness, whatever it is.
The ongoing now, I call it.
The ongoing now, and you can sometimes call it the bloody ongoing now. You know, one thing after another, and oh God, or my favorite quote from John Locke, the philosopher, a perpetual perishing.
Yeah.
She was a savage but a very insightful nurse. But yet it's his dilemma. He's claiming that these potentials are, when I say there, and I'm just expostulating there, you know what I mean, where? Yeah, but it's in this, I don't call this, let's call it objective reality or presence. And we tend to just live in partial versions of it, bits and pieces of it, so to speak. And we are what he called eternity blind. We don't see, because we think that that only that which is real is only that which is in time.
So that's not looking beyond what they see as real. They don't want to look. That's a narrow-minded way of looking at things.
Precisely, absolutely precisely. I don't remember. I can't remember exactly that, because the T.S. Eliot's poem, The Four Quartets, is the most incredible treatise or expression of the nature of time. Whereas I think he actually said, to be conscious is not to be in time. And these kinds of things. And this is true, because if you ever had this feeling, Debbie, but I'm sure you've had it in times, and you'll appreciate the work of revered William Blake about this, who was very au fait with eternity, and since lived in eternity, you know, he lived in eternity's sunrise and this kind of thing. Because for him, an opening of perception, you see, when you begin to see the world in terms of its potentials as much as its actuals. And it's like well, what is it like? I don't know. There are many parallels, but there's one of them is in the realm of stories about the valley of the blind men, or the valley of the blind, who is turned by H.G. Wells into a very interesting story, because the heroes believe that sight would be an obvious advantage, of course. That is the ordinary person, and then he has to go into this valley, and the people are blind, and he starts communicating with him. And of course, they don't understand what he's talking about seeing things. But he keeps on thinking to himself, saying, in the valley of the blind, the one-eyed one is king. He tries to demonstrate his superiority, but all the demonstrations fail until they say, oh, we take pity upon you. Sure, you're suffering from these illusions. And so we think we have the solution. We would take away these organs you call eyes, so you will not be disturbed by them. And he flees from the valley. It's one of H.G. Wells' astonishing stories. His short stories are wonders, really wonderful. So it is a dramatic difference. You see what might be as real as what actually is. And so it touches what might have been and what has been, point to one end, which is always present. There's giving this other value to what might have been. So this is a very big thing for Bennett. We don't have to accept it here, but it has enormous effect, because the question is raised already in our discussion. How, look, this, they're called perceptions of eternity, suspicions, a sense of the stuff of consciousness, the glorious suspended moments, these poignant moments, and you suddenly you'll be like, and the whole world stops. Don't know if you've ever had anything like this. It's a fairly common thing, but it's fleeting in a way. But suddenly you get, and this is, the world stops.
Yes, I've had a few of them, but they are, like you say, they're fleeting. And at the time, it seems so real. But then afterwards, when I think about it, it's kind of like, I can't get back that feeling.
Right, you can't get back.
Yeah. But I know it happened at the time.
That's right, and this is very important. This is where art is coming in. But I just want to think about the, you see, there's a lot about this thinking. You see, in a way, what people call thinking is one of the reasons we're fixated on linear time. You see, it's, there is, I don't know, I'm so caught up in the memory from a film, one of my favorite films, and I always recommend it to people if you can find it, Light Years Away.
Light Years Away?
Yes. It's a film by a Belgian director about, in a sense, an esoteric teacher living in a scrapyard in south of Ireland, who, you know, in these, because in one tradition is very interesting, two traditions, you see a master or whatever it is, in his transmission has to find somebody to transmit to. It's not like having groups. It's not like that at all. But shamans, they have somebody to replace them, and what they do is they hook somebody and bring them in, and it's all a kind of deception to bring them. So this story is all about that, and I think it's absolutely amazing. But there's something, he is training this guy, and this guy, you see him going in the morning down by the sea, and he's doing this some kind of inner attention exercise, and he's talking about the inner perceptions he's being to see, and the man said, the guy said yes, and the guy said, yeah, then this stopped, this perceptions, and Guru says, you know why? And young man said, yes, because I started to think.
I was starting to think, and that was the beginning.
No, starting to think meant you go out of the timeless. And it's in Castaneda, you see. What does the Castaneda say? You know Castaneda?
Right? Yeah, I haven't read his books for many years, but I did used to read them.
Still there. You know, he said, I was saying, stop the world. You remember? How do you stop the world? You don't think. And that's a lot to explore in that, because it's certainly true. Because you see, as soon as this functional mechanism comes into play, it blocks the eternal.
One of the most difficult exercises I do, that I've tried many times, that Gurdjieff puts forward, of you just stare at the wall and don't think. Oh.
I didn't know there was certain exercise. It doesn't sound like him because it's too impossible.
Yeah, it's in one of his. It's written in one of his things, and you put your arms out like this, and you well, not necessarily a wall, but you stare ahead. I think he says stare at something, fix your focus on something.
Usually where you have to stare at one particular point on the wall.
Something, yes, yeah. With your arms out like that, and don't think. Oh, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Well, that's another thing to discuss some other time, but in the injunction, don't think it's a very misguided one, because if you do that, you start fighting thinking. If you do that, you just feed your thinking. And I remember, anyway, there are conversations with Bennett about that, but that's a very big thing. But maybe it's the core of what we're talking about. We don't know. We don't quite know about this. Because one of the questions we've got to ask, but where is the eternity? If we have this eternity is a possible thing, and it's the nature of the possibility of things. Because we look around, is it?
Because I find that quite difficult when I'm reading people like Ouspensky, Maurice Nicole, and yourself has written a book on time that I have. When we talk about eternity, and I sometimes get confused, is that part of the fourth dimension, or is it just time that's part of the fourth dimension? Eternity is something different. It's again, another show, probably that one.
Yeah, we could do something, to sort out the concepts. But this is great, absolutely great what you're saying here. There was a lot of concern at the beginning of the 20th century, which Ouspensky was into, but also artists of many kinds were into it, actually. And they were full of it, and they're to bring to the art an actual representation of the fourth dimension. But this was, it was ambivalent, but mostly concerned with another fourth spatial dimension, which is not the time one at all, but the spatial one. Now, I'd have to bring us back to Mr. Bennett and his very early genius, in a way. I mean, he's so often in his autobiography, he doesn't talk about these early phases. Really, it seems by the time he was 19 or 20 or something about this, he had a construct of a five-dimensional geometry. And he'd even, in those early war years and just after, when he was convalescing from his injuries, his war wounds and so on, and he met people in Cambridge, scientists and so on, conversations with them, and he was, at that time, had a scholarship to go also to Oxford and take up mathematics and develop his ideas. And he was able to have these almost quite peer equal conversations with these boffins, so to speak, and full of ideas, which, because it was all current around that time about relativity theory and other dimensions, it was frothing, and there were all kinds of ideas coming in then. But he had that, but I wanted us to remember the context. He said it could sound like two different worlds. On the one hand, this messing about with equations and abstract concepts over here. On the other hand, being wounded and having a different state of consciousness, and also then this vast collective experience of the death of so many people, how they came together. You see, it wasn't just abstract playing around, because it really mattered about where, these short lives, what does it mean? So it was like searching for a way of making our presence, this experience solid, and not just a fleeting illusion or hallucination, even, one could say. But we only come to it at these moments, like you say, that something, time stops, and then in a moment is dissolved, becomes, and we look back, oh, that was funny, or something like that. So, well, let's look at this. I say, you mentioned, you're quite right about the fourth dimension as a spatial or time, but it's not. Is it here? Is it there? In fact, we seek him everywhere. It's because you can't feel it's quite right to locate it in space. It's not somewhere, but it's not separated. I mentioned an image, a simple image to do with eternity, which may help or may not, because all of these particular examples are just like little pointers. And one is about, I would love it, is about we see it sometimes when you get quite big rocks sometimes poised on a hill.
Mhm.
And there it sits. It could be there for hundreds of years. And then maybe something happens and boom, it falls down. But all those hundreds of years, it sits there. And I get the sense of, it's like it's brooding there, waiting or something, the anthropomorphic, But it means its potential, because of its location, is connected with the potential. As you know, things, we could say, weigh differently according to how high they are. Also, incidentally, but we won't go into it too much, of course. The speed of time, if you can talk about such a thing, changes according to how high you are. I think if you go up higher, time goes slower. Anyway, a little bit. All that, but that presence. So it's not. It's somehow because we've got this reality. Reality is here. It can't be put into different boxes and so on. It's all here, but it's a matter of perception. We're not seeing it. Right now. I know about time. Is it? We're going to get. Well, it's very property in a sense to be outside of time, beyond time, which is why, because in time we're always getting one thing after another. If something happens, then another thing must happen, and another thing must happen. You see, that's what it is. It's just going on and on and on. We call the ongoing, whatever you call life. Stream of life, whatever it is one thing after another. And
they're not normally things that we have control of. Things just happen.
Things just happen, right? And that's a whole other story. Then things don't happen. So it's all put it as well as you're looking at things where nothing is happening. And you see them. Scrabble around, right? Just scrabble around. What can we get hold of? We can't tell any story about it. What is this like? And so here we come, perhaps to. I must do it because I've talked so much, and we haven't touched upon art yet. But I want to bring in art. You see.
Yes, let's bring it round to art. So where would art come in with this through J.G. Bennett? And you were saying the things he was thinking about when he was in the hospital, and that had an influence on what he was thinking about with art then, is that correct?
No, not quite. No, he became aware of this other dimension to time. He had this like something at right angles to time. And this is where he thought art came in. Because, and his fundamental proposition was art expresses eternity. And you could even say it, and I'm using visual language only because it's really difficult to accommodate all the various forms this can take. But it is so that you get, it's expressing, you can't say it's eternity itself in a way, but the experience of eternity.
The experience of eternity.
Yes, now. But it's done in this specific way of being specific, because it's, there you are. You have, wherever it is, and I'm going to cite the example he chose to dwell on a little bit from Van Gogh, which is the Bridget Owl. And where it is, there it is, that canvas, and I don't know, what is it now? 150 years old, I'm not sure how old it is. It's been in various places saying, but there it sits, that thing. And you know, in this crazy art world where people nowadays will pay millions and millions of pounds for original work by Van Gogh, you see, part of that craziness is authentic. It's due to the fact that something was achieved in that object, which was so profound. It's something that can be done not in just that way. Van Gogh did this because every artist would do it in a different way, but it's still the same task, which is like, if you imagine, I don't know if you know the Bridget Isle is a particular place he was, I think, in the south of France, and beautiful, simple colors, and this bridge across this river. And it's, and of course, you look at it and you see, well, it's like a frozen moment. And you think, well, we could have taken the photograph. No, but that would have done it. This is valid. Why? Because why does he have to put all? It has to be this great value and meaning and intention and doing something, because there is what's brought into that work is an experience which is shareable. And Bennett dwells on this. He said, it's no good just, because it has to have that power to be shared so that other people can go and look at that thing and for a moment be opened. It's like the painting is a window and you look beyond space and time into something else. Now, a lot of people who admire Van Gogh would think they wouldn't like what I'm saying at all. Looking beyond space and time is just the beauty of the place, the colors, the light, and blah, 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 and what he was experiencing at the time. And so there are these different views on it, but I have to emphasize, Bennett's view is not usual about this. But then, I'm just remembering the few conversations I had with the physicist David Bohm, who would, obviously because he's an intelligent man, would appreciated art as naturalism, of course. And he liked the painter Raoul, who was renowned for his paintings of clowns. They looked like this very weird colors and treatment in it. And he was describing how you could see how the color in one part of the painting would engage with the color in another part of the painting, and that between them they were creating a space. And you think, well, color is creating a space. You think, what the hell kind of talk is that? But it belongs to this realm. And you see, as I said, many approaches. There is, you think, oh yes, just to take a very obvious well-known example, which is, which combines together Leonardo da Vinci and Lewis Carroll.
All right, okay.
The thing about Lewis Carroll, great, amazing images he produces, was, of course, the Cheshire Cat. Mm-hmm. You remember the Cheshire Cat? He disappears until all that's left is a smile. Mm-hmm. That was a great, great insight, because it's for me, I read that as an understanding of this perception which can enter into things and get the essence of something which is there, which is like the eternal pattern, because the eternal pattern of the cat was his smile. But that's the kind of romantic, poetic way of putting it, but it's still realistic in a way. Now, what's the other thing? Leonardo, of course, the famous Mona Lisa with her enigmatic smile.
Smile, yes. Is it a smile?
And is it a smile? It's not a smile, and all this. And even there, there's significant. You see, well, what's the whole focus of painting? The incredible stuff, the rocks, the hands, the texture, the face, everything like this. And you see, well, and you get there. And the smile, the smile does, it draws you into this mystery of her experience. What do you think? And if you think you're just associating a, uh, is she thinking about her husband? Is she just bored? Is she, what the hell is she thinking about? Which takes you away from the reality. But there is this incredible sense of being in front of the one and only universal human being in the universe. And you begin to see it like that, then that's it. That's the taste of eternity. Like,
Because for everybody looking at that kind of art, say the Mona Lisa, everybody seems to see her differently, don't they?
that is right. Now do you see this? And this is a great bearing on Verger's great claim, which I often find irritating. He goes on and on about objective art, you see, and there's, which, you know, which is challenged by all the fact that all the people going around. He might cite an example of objective art, which one of his examples was in the way was Mont Michel. And people there have different experiences. And so what? Where's this objectivity in it, you see? Well, one of the things about this dimension of being is like you have, I love the phrase, which some people use, like my old friend Joseph Rael, multiple meanings all at once.
Multiple meanings all at once.
As Gay knows, it has to be said all at once. Because it's not, as you begin to see, you know, all these different, like you and I looking at a painting, and I've been around galleries with you, and we see different things, we notice different things and all that kind of thing. But imagine all the thousands going through the galleries and all this experience, but just switch, invert your seeing of this, your reading of it, as I call it, you know, and say, well, it's like these, we were just moments in this, to blab away a cosmic field, you know, around this. And it must have this essential diversity in it. You know, if it was a single value meaning coming out of it, it would just be something like a training manual, not a work of art at all. And people don't understand this because, you know, most of us are so conditioned by this authoritarian, fixed, linear thinking. So, and you say, what is it? And you want it pinned down, you see. But anything which really is alive and changing.
I do find people want to give, look, you explained it wonderfully, a training manual of what I'm looking at. Let me think for myself.
Yeah. And even the thing, you know, you sort of can see the same thing 1,000 times one day. It's different. I know this a lot with music, and so I go, what is that piece of music? And they haven't heard it before. But that's another big topic here, Debbie, about this, what do I call it? I don't want to call it this. Oh yes, this impoverishment of our actual experience. Because in a way, I think what thinking is doing is reducing the value of our experience by chopping it into bits and classifying it. Instead of allowing that which is subtle, flowing, coming into being, you know, becoming rather than become, and all this, because there is a hunting all the time for the fixity. Get a grip, pin it down, define your terms, all this kind of thing. And you can't, you see, to me, it's absolutely astonishing, you know, people go on and on about, oh, and the poet said, what does your poem mean, Mr. Poet? And you say, well, it has all kinds of meanings. What it means to you, it means to you. And this goes on and on, people talking about this, asking about the meaning of a poem and so on. And there are certain things which can be done by investigation, but it doesn't miss the point. Of course, what you do is you can participate in it. Like the EP form, and this is, I don't understand why it's not really appreciated more. So, you know, like with a person like Van Gogh, all those
I know
people
what you
making
mean.
money.
People like to put things in boxes, don't they? And I wonder if it's because
Yeah,
it makes them feel more secure. Where I don't think things should be put in boxes. Things have many meanings and many uh, definitions to them.
I think so. And it's the enrichment of them. You see what is done. I was just thinking, for example, there's been Impressionism. You know, it started up in the late 19th century, and maybe perhaps started by Cézanne and then other sorts like Turner. But it was quite revolutionary at the time. And what it entailed also, and this is very interesting, and to do also with the intrinsic nature of symbols, is that it itself, this art as a group, had to educate the public about how to see that art, because they had to change the mode of perception. This is why art is in a way is so important, because it enriches and makes plastic kinds of perceptions of reality, because it changed it. Because in a way it was more realistic. You know, Monet, he painted shadows with a shade of blue, which is actually true optically, but it had never been done in painting before, because he actually went out and opened his eyes in a new way and then brought his experience out and showed you, look, and it might be simply, look, this is what shadows are actually colored. And
It
but
was
you,
just a revolution, wasn't it? Or revelation, rather, because they are
yes,
amazing paintings to look at.
yes, right. And then you get, when I've been talking about eternity, look at his famous series of Rouen Cathedral, all these strange colors, and I don't know how many, did dozens of them at least, and they're all like flash, in a way, like flashing moments, but it's the same cathedral. And so I'm going to say about our multiple interpretations, because it produces a field of communication, which is what sometimes we call culture. It enables us to communicate together, because you can both stand, say, in front of a painting, and God knows what's happening. Of course, we can chat together and all the rest of it. But I had, for me, a very serendipitous sort of experience in Washington a couple of years ago. Went with friends, you know, Andrew and his daughter Anna, and Darlene, I think, and Daniel, and what I got captivated by is I think it's a National Gallery of Washington with remarkable paintings, including some by a couple by Leonardo, was seeing the people in front of the painting. Because what this brought out for me was that their experience of the painting, you know, was itself, instead of being experienced by me. It was just because of that sense, that lovely phrase of T.S. Eliot, and the roses had the look of flowers that I looked at. And that's the moment when you see, look at a painting, for me, this is the moment you look at a painting and say, this is what is contained in this painting, is how to see this painting and how to see through this painting. That's the rich communication, which I want to attach the phrase to, of the eye of eternity, to see with the eye of eternity. And it has certain characteristics for me as I just look upon it, just thinking, associating in this moment. It has this, can have this deep relaxation in it. Why is there sometimes a deep relaxation? Because there is a kind of perfection in it. What is this perfection? I think you hinted on it 10 minutes or so ago, and you see there's nothing wasted. And that's an incredible thing, isn't it? You know, nothing's out of place, nothing's wasted. And you know something, and what an amateur does, whatever, it just is, how to say it, it's just a combination. You know? But then the real artist feels something, and it's whole. It could not be otherwise. It is entirely what it is. Okay.
I wonder what Mr. Bennett would think of people today going to galleries perhaps standing before the Mona Lisa, like I see people myself, instead of looking at it with their eyes, they're looking at it through a mobile phone as they take a picture. And I wonder if you're not getting the same experience then, because you're looking at another picture, a digital picture of a wonderful painting.
Yeah. Oh, I do know that myself. It just reminds me of when I was early on, had what was my little 60 mil, 8mm camera and so on. I used to photographs, and actually got some of it, a few shots of Bennett and other thing, but I was in Turkey. And I saw it just almost, I think, as you were implying this, it was just getting in the way of me just seeing. I was so occupied with this, you know. But I had another experience earlier, which I've never left. It was how the work on using the device can change your perception. And this was when, as I don't know how old I was, you know, 13, 14, something. And for passing my 11+ exam, my parents would give me a camera, which is so primitive, you wouldn't believe it. A box camera. You could take 8 pictures, black and white on a roll. And that, I mean, I still look back to that camera with longing, you know, and like, whatever it is. And why? Because there's a reason, because I only had 8 pictures. I used to go around Bristol and find things. I remember that this particular time, I went down some pathway and I found this car, and there was this tramp in the car, and I took a picture of this tramp in the car and so on. But I knew I kept on looking and looking and looking for something which would justify me using one of these 8 precious pictures. And I still remember coming out onto this place, which I know it's soon after the war, and it is a bombed area. The speaker houses had been cleared, and but I can still remember it, Debbie, and I can like it's like a wah. It was like blastly, and the perception was such a blast. And why? Because I've been looking and looking and looking for something to see value, which because of the limitations of this device, and so the limitations of the device produced this inverse, exploded in me, and at a later time when I went back there with a cine camera and did make a thing which I got on YouTube about that region. And I think, so yes, but you get these contradictions, I think, May. You know, you could do these, all this is ridiculous, these microphones and this virtual systems, and people are so alienated from the physical reality. And it's a strange virtue of the present pandemic and lockdown, and how some people are, you know, taken up to gardening and very simple things, because they've been having to be made in touch with something. You want something that's living, you know, instead of these dead substitutes you get for it. So let's go back to the sense of this multiplicity. It's certainly a big clue, because it's not like the manual. It's not one-dimensional or flat. It's not fixated, and it's a living. And I like the story from Bennett about Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach, because we could turn to music, and he said, because after, so surprising to learn this, after Bach died, his music wasn't played very much, because he was not considered all that important. A few people, inspired people, actually Goethe was one of the early people to appreciate him, and he got a friend of his to play his pieces and get things together. But then later on, Mendelssohn, the composer, he absolutely fell in love with Bach and propagated his music. And so after quite some decades, people began to recognize Bach. And Bennett explained it in this way. He said, well, it isn't simply that you know, people forgot about him, and then these other people brought him back again and fostered him and put, arranged concerts and made publicity and so on. He said, no. And it's a weird mixture of language, where they say, in that time when in a way he disappeared, Wagner disappeared, his music was evolving, actually evolving, and you think, well, you might think kindly, are you a little bit disturbed, Mr. Bennett? You think such a thing, it's just, our perception is our perception of it, is our use of it, making the scores and orchestrations, and Mendelssohn's versions of it weren't all that accurate in terms of the scores and all of it. I think goes for all this, but no, the music itself could change. And this is a deeper thing, but it's certainly connected with eternity, because it's notion that it can go on in its own time and place. It doesn't have to stay still. So the very nature of, say, an event could change. Why? Because it still had this dimension of eternity. So alternative ways it could have developed can come and be experienced. And this is what we do in terms of things where we imagine that we're looking back after a long period of time and all other things that have happened. And so it's we who are seeing things in a different way, and it's remained fixed. You see how the picture is. That is fixed, that is a thing. And there's we. We are alive, and we are intelligent. And so we keep changing our views of this, and it's our imposition on it, you see. But Bennett turned it right on its head. And you can quite cheerfully totally disagree with him on this and say, no, it's the event itself, it's the work of art itself, which is changing. It's not much in front of our eyes, but it's changing in its own time. In its own time is like, in a way, it's changing in eternity. It's like going through the different possibilities there. In some way I can't even begin to describe, let alone understand. So,
what I like about that is that while it's doing its evolving, it's getting no interference from anyone, is it? There's no one trying to change it. It's evolving on its own.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe we could do that. That's the thing, because the thing Bennett threw in about this is, this, whatever some things are, like works of art or events or God knows what, they've got to have a kind of, he called it this a kind of degree of significance. It's not everything that does away. A lot of it, just everything dies into, by and large, into insignificance. But there are some things which remain. You think of things which, well, in simple terms, we say, which stand the test of time. But with this proviso of this sort of examples we're looking in now, that things can sort of disappear and come back. And we got onto this topic, I didn't expect to do it, and it's fascinating. I have no answers, but one of the prime examples is that great work by, the mystic Julian of Norwich.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well. You know that her ideas and her writings were not popular with the church at that time, because her vision was based on love, and the authorities, their vision was based on power and control of people. But the manuscripts were somehow preserved, but they almost went underground. And a story I saw on television where they were only preserved through a group of Benedictine nuns who actually went to France at a certain period and managed to, by some miracle, get through what was happening in the attacks on religion during the French Revolution, and have got resurrected only in the 20th century. For centuries it wasn't known. and somebody found, and it's extraordinary story how this one woman found this one manuscript. So you think, this is unbelievable. You know, this and this great work, you know, which is a great work of English literature, an amazing kind of just writing, let alone her spirituality. You wonder, how is it possible? And on the one hand, you think, well, how much so many precious things have been lost forever. So the vulnerability of art is important in this. Now,
And do you think during that time, Bennett would say, well, Julian of Norwich's book was kept secret, then that was evolving still?
yes, I you would say.
So that's true meaning of, because like you say, she's writing about love and compassion. So that's getting stronger and stronger in the meaning and coming out in the book when we need it so much in this century.
That would be the kind of conclusion I'd say. It's just to me, some days I say, no, I really like this to be true, but I don't know if it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a worthwhile engagement to get into, you know, with this. And one side of it is certainly I've learned to be sort of suspicious about giving all power and significance to, say, us in general at this time, and me as a person in my life, because there's all the thing about, you know, all this I language you have, I think this, I do this, and the terrible picture which has come up, which is being increasingly criticized in our kind of contemporary Western civilization, that the only points of what we call this conscious, intelligent experience is just me, possibly you, I don't know. Or may grant you some independent, intelligent experiencing, you know, on my nice days. And you see, just this turning around is beginning to happen, which is extraordinary, where you just it's a simple philosophical point, the subject-object thing. There's such a contamination. There is the observer and there's the observed, and all that. You see, everybody takes for granted. It's the rot. is a delusion, and that's beginning. Any sense of beginning to sort of, I don't know what the verb is, to give way to the living meaning in what is outside of ourselves, which is not in our control, which is not in our frame, so to speak. And so you get, again, I mean, you get into such experience as this. And, you know, I'm speaking to you, Debbie, I mean, you're very kind. Let me speak, and I can follow these lines and say, do I believe in it or not? I'm not sure sometimes, but I go along with it. And that enters where you see of, you're looking at painting, say, and then is there a moment sometimes, I'm sure, so a little taste of it, where the painting looks at you?
Absolutely. I
You,
have definitely experienced that myself, and not necessarily a portrait. Sometimes I feel like I like landscape shots. I feel
yes.
like they're watching me a lot as well. And I would love to be in a gallery on my own one day with nobody else there, just to see if I could really talk to the paintings. And it's not something I've ever really told anybody else. It's, you know, with all this lockdown, I used to think, how could I get in touch with perhaps Tate and say, can I just wander the gallery on my own? I know they'd never allow it, but for me, it would be, because I wanted to myself, it'd be for a magical, esoteric experiment to see if the paintings talk back to me, because they're lonely. You know, and I don't think just paintings,
I love it.
Statues, you know, most types of art, I think, have a life in them.
Yes.
But whether it's the artist that's created it, put that life into them, or they themselves, the art itself has made its own life because it's been born, I'm still pondering. I'm still not sure what I think on that. Like
Yes,
you and me, we love our William Blake, and I often think that the William Blake work is trying to tell me the story.
yes, and yes, and
And I would
there's
just
the,
quickly add, as you know, I love John Martin, the artist John Martin, and his work, most of
oh,
it is very religious, theological art. And I really feel that that has a, you know, that kind of art is the art I like. And Carlo Crivelli is another one. I sometimes go and look at his artwork and feel like them people, especially his St. Michael standing on a dragon, is going to suddenly speak to me. And maybe
ah,
that dragon is going to rise up and say, help me or something. It's something I don't really discuss with many people because I sound nuts, but it's art, it's alive, isn't it?
that is the, I love the phrase, you know, the everyday phrase, you know, so I've been taken out of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And you heard that, and it's usually got a kind of positive um, tone to it, you know, taking out, and like you go on holiday and taking out. This is, strikes me at this moment. I want to say that it's like you in the gallery going, but it's because you can be taken out of it. But it's in the way you looking, as long as you're looking, you're not seeing. It sounds crazy, and I'm thinking, whereas when it's being seen, after all, you know some of the forfeit literature, and there are people. I think Chakal was one of them. They struggled. Everybody struggled the whole way to understand what's meant by self-remembering and so on. And Tugol talks about this different state, we call it, not pretending to know what it is. And he said it's like, he said, through a translation, of course, he's French. He said, it's like, I am being conscienced.
I am
Not
being conscienced.
it's not I am conscious, but I am being conscienced.
Conscious.
And it's a similar character of speech which Bennett had about when he criticizes Gurdjieff for using phrases like having will. He said, this is absolutely, you can't have will. You know, will has you. And since consciousness has us, you have to turn it around. You get these reversals and this kind of thing. So there. And that can, so what the work of art can do, if it's functioning, it leads you, let's just blab it, or I'm the blabber, not you. And they leads you into eternity. That's what it is. What's that word? I've gone to it to some, read it somewhere in a novel about the Celtic idea of the Everland, which is one evocative way of expressing eternity, Everland. It's like you're in front of a painting and you say, this is something about, this will always be true. This is true forever. But let's jump, because I know time we're running out and so on. We've hardly begun in a way. But I'm just, one of my hopes is you know, with you, and you know, certainly true, any listener contributes the harder part, which is always to bring or allow to come into you your actual moments of encounter with works of art and music and painting, architecture, whatever it is, and even, of course, dance and these other forms. Because these, I tell you, it is this other characteristic of art is necessary to remember is specific. You know, is, and Bennett dwells on this. He said it's not like science which deals in generalities. Science has got to be specific. You know, yeah, the concrete particular. And there's a whole current of thought. I don't know how else to put it. I'm thinking of Rilke again, often referred to, I think it's in the notebooks of Martin Luis Abrigo, which I mentioned yesterday. It's where you're talking about the poet's talking about, you're breaking free of all these generalities, and getting back to the concrete particulars. You see, out of these concrete particulars, you see something. If you generalize, you miss this reality. That's a very, 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 very important insight. Because it's like it's dealing with oneself. Imagine teaching oneself as a unique work of art. And it has to be, you have to make it and in a specific way. And that's why often a lot of the teaching going around is almost dysfunctional, because it just treats everybody as more or less the same. And
we're not. And that's why when we're teaching people, then teachers should be looking at the individual and not the whole class as a whole. Some individuals need to be shown one way, other individuals need to be shown in a gentler way.
Indeed. Yeah.
Get told everything to learn everything on rote. I think that's how it's said, or rote, R-O-T-E.
I wrote.
Yeah, and it's
R-O-T-E.
not the way for helping people to.
And also, I mean, a lot
forward.
these so-called spiritual gurus who insist people use the same words. Until they're experienced, they don't use the right words, they're not allowed to speak, and all this kind of nonsense which goes on. And but yeah, you see the kind of particular, and then see, and I did this. A time when I sort of got into painting, or painting got into me, and I became enamored of oils. I don't know if you've ever done it. You may have done, probably have. Just the smell of the turfs and the textures, and the plasticity of it, and just this wonderful sort of thing. And one of my emphasizes is sheer materiality as the thing of art. You see, it's very interesting in going back to Bennett's function, being, and will. That he said there was function, being, and will is a sort of general. What do you call that now? Yeah, well, he called it the cosmic, or the cosmic aspect. Then he dealt with them differently. He said, well, subjectively, with function you have knowledge. That means subjectively what can happen in a subject, conscious. And with being you have consciousness, and with will you have understanding. He says there's also an objective aspect of them. So what is function is, I forgot what function is, but anyway, being, the objective aspect of being was actually materiality, matter. Now this is very fascinating to me, because of I got very caught up with companion of Sri Aurobindo, the mother, the French woman, and I looked at bits and pieces of her kind of spiritual diary, whatever it is, her phenomenology, and her concern. She talks from time to time about seeing matter in a totally different way. And it's first of all, it was to me a surprise that being is matter, why? Because it's like this sense of what is there, what is there, and it's like, damn it, this stuff, being. So it's not. I think this he emphasized, because it's not getting. It's to get you away from this airy fairiness, and you go again, being, kind of
being,
sort of mystical kind of feeling. No, it's stuff, it's the stuff which you're made, being is the kind of, and there was a lot to do with stuff and so on in the work and the rest of it. So going back to the art, it's like in music, it's the actual sound in the air. And there's been a change from the medieval time, because in the medieval time it had that old pattern of treating the mind with its generalities as the higher, and the actions of the body as being concrete and therefore the lower. And that's, I think, thankfully being changed in the modern time. You think this bringing it, it's like this bringing into the concrete, into the manifest, is art. You see, it's kind of like a gesture. It is here, and the fact that somebody has to go through so much. And flashing through my mind, there would be programs on recently about Rembrandt, which I was looked in casually, then I couldn't stop watching. And time he worked and so on, he did things on canvas which nobody else could do. And part of that became known as a person able to show aging like nobody had ever done before him. But it meant you see, that's why in his paintings, the self-portraits, you actually see the nature of our existence. They're shown. It's there. What it is to be a human being is there, and that's something which gets hold of people. And you look at it, and some people absolutely adore Rembrandt as like the greatest artist of all time. What is it he did?
But that's also something to do, I think, with the appreciation of learning about art, because most people would look at a piece of art and not know about the artist or why they made that painting. But once they start looking into that, then suddenly they have an interest. Having a background to it adds to just looking at a painting. It makes you look at it with different eyes again, rather than just looking at a painting just because it's in front of you. You're like, oh, because that artist was thinking about, like, for example, Rembrandt, who was thinking about the aging technique. And it just makes you look at things differently, doesn't it? For example, I never really liked Raphael until recently, where I'd gone to a talk where a man explained why Raphael painted in such a way, and suddenly it made me see Raphael in a completely different way. Now I love him, but maybe I'm just naive and I need to be told what to like, but having a background to what something's about does help.
That's very true, and it's very, it goes for reflection. Absolutely is true. And I mentioned the culture around, because the works of art create the culture, but it's reciprocal to say the culture produces them, it expresses them, but it's developed and renewed by these individual creations. But still, as you say, exactly, you have to often to learn how to appreciate these things. And there's something which I'm attracted to in my stuttering words here about direct experience. You see, you get this kind of naivety. You think, if I've done all this talking around and art and eternity and so on, and say, well, it's put people in front of the Rembrandt, whatever it was, and what do they see? And they think you're right, but they see nothing. Just a picture of an old man, whatever it is, and they can think this or that, and you go this other thing. But what is this additional? What is this? Why should we have to go through a process to be able to stand in front of the painting and for it to have an effect on you? There's a puzzling thing around here, because it's also true applied to what this theme, I mentioned these words, direct experience, which concerns me sometimes, because people talk about, oh, this is a direct experience for me. But it's, without wanting to dismiss the kind of feeling of the importance of that claim, there's also the writer coming in that You see, like you call the direct experience is not enough. That it's not what you call direct experience is not all that direct, because in a way, what you can see direct in one sense is what you can see anytime, anywhere. It means there's something has happened, which is a coalescence of worlds. What a grand phrase that is. It's where the work of art, now just speaking from what's appearing to me, the work of art is an occasion for the bringing together of the whole, which is the bringing together of the whole world. And it is where this is a domain of the work of unity, of wholeness, which is the world of being. And so you get this element that you can't, or should not, you just take, see, when I use that phrase, stand in front of the painting and look at it, it's so incomplete and false. Because you see, a bit like you were hinting at with being by yourself in the gallery, and it's the, you know, because it's calling upon you in a way, well, this is my way of talking, it's calling upon you there to bring something to it. Now, and because you can see, can't you? It's obvious, you know this very well. You just go along and stand in front of it and say, okay, you know, teach me or whatever, inform me or do me or whatever it was, you know. And he was a bit irresponsible and not sitting here like a kind of dummy waiting to be, you know, come on, bring it on then, you know, see what you can do. No, because I'm just changing, just a simple cartoon image I have in my brain. You come along to it, but you have to bring something, because only something is really happening. And I think this is universally true when there is a meeting. And that's what emerged for me, Debbie. You know, because I love those times going around the gallery with you, because I felt there was this flashes going on or something, and that's why I mentioned about in the National Gallery in Washington and seeing the people with the painting, because it sort of reminded me what was really going on. You know? And there's a lot to be said about that particular experiment. But this bringing together, so you have the obligation, in a way, to learn about the artist and his life and painting technique and God knows what else it is. You have an obligation. So there's an interesting side to this, because I've never really properly looked at that. You know, we talk about the work of art, and it's like in the abstract. You know, you think, well, who's there? What are they doing? You know, it's not just the work of art, but it's also this total experience is the spectator as well. But unless he or she is enlivened and inspired by it, nothing has happened. The work of art is not there. Imagine. And I've got a picture from your words to say these poor works of art languishing there until somebody can actually come and greet them. You know, because like can only talk to like. So you have to find something in yourself to find this realm. So it can be, yes, I think I'm just exploring, forgive me, this calling forth out of you, this joy of encounter, then because it means something can be born, that the creation is not just assumed to be in the hands of that particular artist. So you get this problem isn't there? You get some chap, and he's extolled. He's a genius, you know. Da da da, you know. Going, oh, yes, the genius, the kind of thing. But
And we're all supposed to think he's a genius because someone's declared he's a genius.
that's right, yeah. And in a way, it could produce awe in one, but also it kind of puts you off. You know, so it's such a fantastic genius and so on. What the likes of me doing going to do with his stuff? I mean, I haven't got a clue how to do what he does, so how can I relate to it? You know, but you got to relate to it and find it. So this is a side of it I never really considered before. And because it also has a bearing on, you know, we must make a few references before we finish towards Mr. Gurdjieff's objective art and so on. And I think there's something to be questioned about how he does this. But see, what makes it objective is accomplished because, well, it's, let's use common terms, you know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That's absolutely true. But you finish there, you get stuck also, because it's then everybody goes around, well, I like that one, and everybody else says, no, I don't like that one, I like this one, and that's the end of the conversation. It's useless, it's puerile, it's awful, because you get this kind of seeing in the truth of it, I believe, which it can be shared, because you actually make something. And further, as I speak about this, so you see my words are stumbling coming together, because I think this is quite remarkable about it, that you have wanted to find this, this answer to this challenge. Okay, you walk into this gallery and you come out of it. Has anything changed for you? Yeah, say, well, I like this, I didn't like that. It's puerile, it's nothing. So you'd have to be able to see. So well, for me, it turned around the conversation to this, you know, to be able to see into eternity. And what makes you able to do that? To make yourself big enough, you know, to take in the Mona Lisa. You know, say, that's my Mona Lisa. You know, I did. And he did a bit of experiment towards that in realm of music, because partly, not only, but partly because he influenced my late friend, Matchett, who was a remarkable man in many respects, and he talked about neuroeducation in terms of listening to music, and took it in certain ways. And one of the ways was to say, it's like, imagine, and just to make a picture, imagine the kind of music coming out of, well, as in olden times, I suppose this came out of the cosmos into a creative person, we call in this case a composer, who then creates a means of instruction which is taken then by a person called a conductor and applied in an orchestra, and the orchestra then plays it, and now we're now hearing is what's being played. They said, I could take this as a stream, like a waterfall going down, and then you take yourself to go up the waterfall, go upstream, until you actually reach the point where the work is being composed. And you can get tastes of this just trying to do it. I can't claim it, you know, right into it literally, but it's like taste of it, because that seems to be the important. It's rather like the same thing with exercises we did on reading, where you get to a point of, I think you mentioned it earlier on too, when you're actually kind of talking with the author. And that is for me, because we're probably running out of time, that for me is the kind of substance of objective art. And it's not like how it sometimes appears in the description that somebody's got this, I don't know what it is, this, well, good recorded this, got this mathematics worked out, which ensures that it will have certain effects. You know, it's to do with well, in this conversation with the praxis, the encounter when you can, the act by which you enter into the being of a work of art. And just speaking about it then, I'm kind of slightly surprised that when people don't seem to talk about this sort of thing very much. They talk about judgments about the work of art and so on, but not about the encounter. And as we were looking at an article of mine, I was reviewing, and I cited a book by a man on reading. And I remember the days of my dear friend William Pensinger, a novelist and thinker, and he said about 20th century innovations in literature, and how he insisted that somebody pointed out it was not what important was innovations in writing. What was important were innovations in reading. Because you see, part of this story of art is the change in the audience. Yeah. Can you imagine? They're getting kind of tuned in to other vibrations. And perhaps I'll end with this story about kinds of art, because I mentioned before all these different ways of portraying it, and you can have what I'm going to talk about one specific form. It has to do with that wonderful artist Klimt, this woman who I think it was last year who had this major exhibition in the Guggenheim. A remarkable woman who knew people like Rudolf Steiner and worked with this small group who were anthroposophical in origin, but they became, I was like directly aware of the, I just call them roughly the higher ones, which has always been a strong aspect of theosophy. And then, and she was kind of got this instruction, and she developed a totally new kind of art. And to his shame, Steiner didn't appreciate what she was doing and rebuffed her, but she persisted and created enormous numbers of paintings. Something just fell on the floor, I know not why, all by itself. And I don't know if you've ever seen. Yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen her. This woman Clinton, they're completely abstract. But she started this before Kandinsky and so on started doing this. But she then specified that these works will not be released until I think 25 years after her death, as they were.
She did indeed. That's what she specified. She didn't want any, for 25 years. And then there was a showing after 25 years, and then it kind of went quiet again. But in the last few years, there's been a big revival of her work.
Yeah. Well, the story relates to our things about Bach and so on, all that. Why would she keep those things hidden, you see? It's all very strange. But there it was, not like an old man on that, but no, these circles and spirals and lines and all this. And you see, anyway, there are no rules in art.
No, there isn't, and there shouldn't be. Art should be freewheeling to do what you.
It goes, one of the things what happens in any real work of art is that the artist creates his rules, which are specific to him, because you can't just.
Well, that's part of why I didn't want to go to art school myself, because I've never been one to follow rules. I've always been a rebel. So I know I probably would have hated it. When I did my art O-level, it put me off art for a long, long time. I didn't come back into art till my 30s.
I know for other reasons, my son, George, who was a very gifted, got ruined by our college in Dundee. Absolutely, it's a disaster. Well, that's whatever it is we've got to. There are all these imagine all the different ways, you know, art, all this painting, and you go to Asian art, and this wonderful Taoist kind of painting, and you know, you look at sometimes a Chinese drawing of a frog or a bamboo shoot or something, and something tries to go, wow. And there's, so all these cultures are different, and all the rest of it, it's all this multiplicity. And we started by talking about how this multiplicity is not something which is evidence of a fragmentation, of an isolation, but of a richness. It's like the multiple colors and textures in the painting is just so, of art itself, it has different multiple colors and textures. And I think that the issue I want to end with on this session is to question this simplistic view of objective art by having this, like, pictures, this superior worked out mathematical scheme, which seems to be suggested by Gurdjieff, and also about the use of art as a transmission, because I was thinking about it before we talked, and I said, well, this, of course, you can use art to transmit definite information, because but then you're using art, you're not actually creating art. Art itself has got to have this uniqueness. It's got to have this encounter. And so the eternal timeless is not like a blueprint of fixity. It's openness to the world of being, to what is, and hopefully we can go out to the gallery and walk in the gardens and feel our own body and find what is the same. And that's perhaps the ultimate kind of goal, if there is something like a goal in it.
I know what you mean, because one of the things I really do miss, especially with this lockdown, is going to galleries and museums. I always have fun when we go to a gallery together. I look forward to doing that again sometime in the future when they finally open again.
Okay, we'll make a date, Debbie.
We'll do something. We've spoken for nearly 2 hours. It's not quite, but nearly. So I'm going to bring it to a close. God. It's gone really quickly.
Come on, 2 hours.
Nearly, not quite, almost. So as usual at the end, I like to say thank you, obviously. But if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what's their best way to get in touch with you, or to find your books, or about your diversity website? What would be the address? Diversity.org?
Yes, that's the website, and then my books can be found on Amazon under my name, hopefully. And what was the other thing? Oh yes, my email, if you want it, is very easy to remember, anthony@anthonyblake.co.uk. I think that's what's needed. But anyway, bless you, Debbie, and I hope people have patience with, and you have such patience as my meanderings, because this is the way I want to do this, not to be a kind of pop-up pseudo-authority pontificating on things which are just memories, but to get into tricky waters, splash around a bit, you know, not put on airs. And so I don't know.
I've really enjoyed it. I like doing these kind of talks myself. I always enjoy talking with you. And the whole idea of art that's disappeared, for example, like William Blake disappeared not long after he died and didn't get reborn again till W.B. Yeats. It was evolving during that period. It had disappeared. It's just,
isn't it great?
I'm really like loving.
This is like putting your trust in eternity. You know, there's all this fuss about what we ought to do and arrange and develop, and you think, well, no. And people say, oh, you just want to lay back and be quiet. No, I want to really, really begin to see with the eye of eternity.
Oh, thank you. Bless you, Tony. I'm going to press stop. Thank you very much.
Okay.